going to do very brief introductions because anything longer than very brief, and I'd be standing in the way of, no offense to other deans in the audience, I'd be standing in the way of four of my favorite deans at not only GBSN, but in the industry. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction. Soumitra is going to moderate the session, and he needs no introduction, but he's had several already during this conference anyway. But I want to introduce Maurice. Maurice Radebe, he's the head and director of the Wits Business School in South Africa. And before that was as an EVP responsible for Cecil's energy business worldwide, but with 30 years experience in energy, the way I understand it. And I met Maurice for the first time here, but I've been chasing him for the last, I don't know, 6 months, because we have a mutual friend that's been trying to connect us. So it's really a pleasure to have finally met you, Maurice, and welcome here to our conference, but also to the industry. Thank you so much. Jikyeong Kang, I've known for so long, right? So long. I want to make sure I include president, CEO, dean, and MVP professor of marketing at the Asian Institute of Management. But when you think about what she's doing, she was most immediately past chair of AACSB, is on the board of EFMD, is on the board of the AAPBS. I'll get to us.
This one.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that one. Right, this one. Right, the board of AAPBS and the Principles for Responsible Management Education, and the best one, the Global Business School Network. So we're happy about that. And then
that's awesome.
Jinhua and Zhao, we are welcoming today from Cornell University, where he is the dean, the David Nolan Dean, I need to be careful, and professor of applied economics and management at Cornell University in the Dyson School of applied management. But I want to get to the most interesting thing. I'm just going to say one thing, and that is he was part of the Environmental Economics Advisory Committee of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So his work, very much the way I heard him say it, our work is very dear to his heart. But I want to say that his work is also very dear to our heart at GBSN. So welcome, Jinhua. I'm going to get out of the way. Soumitra, it's all yours.
Well, thank you so much, Dan, and thank you to my fellow Dean panel members, and also thank you to all of you for sticking around till the end. So I think this is like the really committed colleagues who are here in the program. Okay, so we have an exciting discussion ahead of us. And what I thought is that we've had a number of scenarios presented by other eminent speakers about challenges the world faces and others, potential risks we face in the world. I thought, let's make the session about innovations and actual positive developments that are happening in our schools. What is happening right now? We have a very global perspective, Asia, Africa, North America, and I represent Europe right now. So we have a very global perspectives out here. So let's try and see what are those good practices we see in our various schools. What can we learn from them? Can we give you ideas that you can take back to your own schools? And also, I think, spend maybe a little bit of time looking at the future. What do we hope that we will achieve or we'll do in our schools respectively? So let's divide the discussion a little bit in two parts. The first part is much more what has happened today or in the recent past, what are good practices? And then we'll shift to the next part to what do we see in the future, okay? So maybe I'll first begin with you, Jinhua. So what do you see happening? Cornell is clearly the land-grant university in New York State. Lots of things happening in Cornell. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Soumitra. And thank you for the audience. This is my first time to be at a GBSN meeting. And I've listened to all of the sessions this morning and this afternoon. It's so impressive. It is truly dear to my heart. At the Dyson School, which is the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management, our ethos is our business is a better world. So Soumitra mentioned that Cornell University is a land-grant university. So for those of you who are not familiar with land-grant mission, it basically is a mission of engagement. It's a mission of knowledge generation that matters, that has impacts on society, positive impacts on the society. And Dyson School really grew out of that land grant tradition. As a result, early on, we developed our strategy, and our strategy is to train our students to be future business leaders who not only have strong business skills, but also who can translate their business skills for greater and positive impact on the society. Now, so the question is, how do we do that? Right? We have our ethos and we have our courses and things like that that has different elements, but we have a one major with 11 concentrations. We have students who come in who are interested in finance. We have students who come in who are interested in data analytics. So how do we instill this ethos of societal engagement and positive impacts to our curriculum? So we are doing many things, but let me give you one example. And this example is what we call the Grand Challenges curriculum. This is a 3-year curriculum that every Dyson undergrad student has to go through. In fact, it's actually 4-year. The first year, there's a design, your path, but for all seriousness, it starts in the second year with a very intensive, purposeful communication course. This is where the students would be writing typically, we do business communication, verbal, written, all sorts of communication skills. But here in the Grand Challenges program, that set of courses are all designed to have the societal impacts in mind. Okay? And the examples would include, for example, certain elements of the 17 sustainable, the SDGs, food security, poverty, sustainability, and things like that, right? So the writing programs are really thinking about how do you communicate on those SDGs? How do you communicate or how do you interact with the non-traditional clients, going beyond businesses, going into NGOs, the civil society, or government agencies. And the third year, there's a pre-project, pre-immersion program, but really the labor-intensive part is the 4th year. In the 4th year, that's the immersion, that is the engagement with clients. Now, that immersion would include students divided into very small groups, 4 or 5 students each group. They would be doing the immersion with either large businesses, maybe in their sustainability departments, or they're working with NGOs or local governments. Some projects, for example, includes green transportation in the local community, or international businesses expanding to the New York region on sustainability issues. And so they would be really doing the kind of immersion, the traditional immersion, experiential learning, but with this sustainability goals as the guiding principle. They would do that, and a big part of what they do is not only providing services, providing or leading to immediate positive impacts, but more importantly, reflection. So they come back, there's a long process of reflection in terms of not only what they've done for the society, but more importantly, what they've learned. What they've learned about the role of business in civil societies, and what they've learned about the role of business skills in translating or in leading to positive changes. So, by the way, this program, the initial design was all about the 17 SDGs. So we are tackling all of the courses, or it's all tackling different aspects of the 17 SDGs. And now we have this basic framework that we are building on. Currently, we're in the process of building a Grand Challenges Alliance. This would be a mechanism to involve our clients, be it private businesses or small and medium enterprises, government agencies or NGOs, and all of those, to have a kind of network where they will have opportunities of interacting with like-minded enterprises or entities, but also through this network to have access to the leading experts who are doing research on businesses, doing research on the societal engagement and all of that, right? I mean, so this would be a network where there's interactions among the clients, there's interactions with the experts, and of course, interactions with our students. So this is just one of the many examples.
Right. No, I'm very familiar with all the great things that Cornell does. And I think this amazing, amazing example of one very high impact program. One question, if you don't mind me asking, is how do you ensure the faculty engagement in the process? You mentioned experts, but how is the faculty engagement supported?
Right. So several things. Number one, not every faculty is engaged. Okay, so I'll be very frank. There are faculty members who are in more traditional business or economics disciplines who are not engaged that intensively. But what happens at Dyson is we do have a large number of dedicated faculty members who are eager to get engaged. So we do not have a shortness or a short supply in terms of the faculty members being involved in this. Now, the question then is really what is the bottleneck is the resources that are needed to reduce the transaction costs of working with a large number of clients. I mean, you can imagine we have, for example, this year, we have about 250 students going through the fourth year, the senior year program. So this is over 50 student groups. And every group needs a faculty advisor, and not, a faculty could be advising maybe, 4 or 5 groups. So we need a large number of faculty members. We also need the kind of staff support to reduce the transaction costs of working with our clients. So it's really reducing the transaction cost. That part is critical. And then once we address that part, then the faculty interest is there.
Great, thank you so much. Maurice, what's happening? Especially, I think, you're coming in from the business, a long, illustrious career in business, coming into academia, and there's a good reason why you chose to make the decision, but I think it's great you're in academia now. But how do you see, I mean, from the business eyes, what is happening in Wits and what are the great things?
No, thank you very much. I think this is a wonderful occasion. Dan and the team are doing a great job. Let's give him a round of applause. It's the first time I'm here. I enjoyed the boat yesterday, so keep on doing this. I'll come back. I think, as you've introduced me, I come from an energy business. I've been in a business world for 30 years, primarily in fuel, oil, gas, energy, electricity, and renewables. And at the end of my career, I was asked to come and run the business school. So to me, really what is exciting is just to be at the intersection of business and academia. The real issue I want to raise, because it's close to my heart, I've spent all my years in energy, is and I want to be a little bit controversial here, because I think it's very important that I raise this issue, particularly from the African continent, that for us, energy divide is a major issue. Let me just give you a little bit of statistics. 600 million Africans right now do not have electricity. Just imagine about that number. And most of the people who are affected out of that 600 million, I can even add another one. 900 million do not have clean cooking energy. And who is impacted there is a young girl child who needs to wake up in the morning, go and find some firewood and make food and end up not going to school. Now, this is quite important that I dramatize this, because this is very important. Now, the whole debate around climate change is an important one. Make no mistake, I am not a denialist, and I believe we need to fight climate change with all our might. But I must say that pre the war, coal was demonized. Yes, accept that. It went into a state where gas was demonized. But when the war happened, things changed just like that. Europe is buying more coal from Africa at a huge price. And gas is back on the table in Europe. Now, what does that say to us when at business schools? At our business school, we've got an African Energy Leadership Center that we've started purely because we wanted to map up the just transition, inclusive transition, in transition that is making sure that it does not leave anyone behind. It does not exacerbate poverty and inequality, which is the biggest problem. So what is the business school we doing, and I'd like to urge all of us to do, is to really enter the debate around energy. In a sense that if we've got this inconsistency that is coming, for our students, when we're talking about climate change, their sustainability, you must do anything that you can to decarbonize, and you must come up with innovative ideas to do that, which we are doing, but it sends a cognitive dissonance. It sends a sense of lack of trust, a lack of hypocrisy. So we need to come in there as honest brokers and say, this is what needs to be done. And this is what needs to be done fast and quick. And therefore, right now, 3 weeks ago, we had a major African energy week. And the biggest issue was, how do we ensure that this transition is dictated by Africans and is dictated in a way that it makes sure that it does not leave anybody behind? And that is where our students are focusing on. We're researching that. We're researching this whole transition. We're making sure that it's innovation, and it's actually making sure that it's taken into consideration the context and the peculiarity of our continent. I'll pause there.
No, that's an excellent, in fact, segue to the follow-on question for you, which is energy is very high on the agenda for a number of reasons. You've outlined some of them already. How do you engage the faculty and the students in this debate and this thing? So I'm sort of, what advice would you give to many of our colleagues, because often energy is seen with suspicious eyes inside many business schools by students.
Absolutely. Yeah. What we have done is we have set up what I will call Africa Energy Leadership Center. The purpose of that center is to basically engage faculty. So we've got, for instance, most of our faculty, those guys who are talking energy geopolitics, energy sustainability, energy environment. And we've got a whole program which produces, it's a master's in management and energy leadership. So it's a program. And then we've got a postgraduate diploma in energy leadership. And the emphasis is leadership, because we've got the main campus, which is the university, that's got engineers, got chemicals and engineering, all sorts of engineers. But the idea is that when they come in, they need to be leading this major revolution in the energy. And they need to understand the complexities of it. They need to understand the integration between the different value chains, the electricity value chain, the gas value chain, the coal value chain, renewable value chain, wind, solar, hydrogen. How do they integrate in order to solve this massive problem that we're facing? This is an existential threat to mankind. So we also involve faculty from the main campus, guys who are scientists, guys who are climatologists. We've even created a position at the Wits main campus, a PRO DVC focusing on energy transition and equality. You cannot separate the two. If you have this energy transition and you do not understand the inequality, you're going to create major problems. And that's where the faculty is coming in.
No, it's actually a great example, because here you see your business leadership energy experience being translated into a very important academic initiative. And I wish you success, of course, with that. And I'm sure we can learn a lot from this kind of initiative that you're having inside Wits.
Thank you.
Jikyeong, you have a long and very illustrious career, not just at AIM, but also, I think, in your role as chair of ACSB, you have this broad sort of overview of what's happening in many of the leading business schools. Any examples from your own school of what you have seen that you'd like to share?
I think there are lots of very good examples, but maybe I can pick one example to illustrate the point that we are talking about, but perhaps relevant to some of the schools. So AIM is a very, very tiny school. And that's why when Dan introduced me, I had many titles, because I have to wear multiple hats, just like many of my colleagues. So some years ago, we introduced, about almost 8 years ago, we decided to introduce Master in Innovation and Business. And we initially targeted the STEM graduates and teaching them sort of like MBA skills, but with more focus on innovation. And then we realized we really need to walk the talk. So one of the things we did was really changing the curriculum in other programs, going more from profit to purpose, focusing on enterprises to ecosystems, going from consultative model to more collaboration models. And we saw an opportunity where we can actually encourage students to think about why diversity is such an important subject, why engagement needs to really come from taking actions, not just talking about it. So some of you may remember a few years ago, PRME had this competition where they asked companies throughout the world to come up with a problem, challenge they want to solve along the line of SDGs. And then they asked the students groups to participate and actually work with these companies in coming up with the solutions. And hundreds of student groups participated, and companies chose an option they would like to think about implementing. So what we did at AIM was actually to open up the opportunities, not to just one program, but we actually made a requirement. The team they are going to form has to be multi-program. So they had to have one student coming from Masters in Innovation Business. They have to have another student, at least one coming from Masters in Development Management, that our MDM program is all about SDGs. Many of them are civil servants, work in not-for-profit organizations, and I call them their lovely tree huggers. And then third one is actually MBA program student. So what happened during that project was they had to learn how to speak each other's language. So MBA students are all about bottom line. MDM students, they want to save the world. They want to think about people, planet, and all those things. And innovation students oftentimes so focused on innovation, they don't always think about, is it scalable? Is it going to be able to be something that our resources can support? So to make a long story short, the final 3 winners were invited to New York when they had a UN meetings to present their outcomes after the project went on for 3-4 months. And top 3 winners were from AIM, very, very tiny school. And I don't think it's mainly because our students are excellent. Our students are brilliant. But I think the reason is because there was a diversity in groups. There were different perspectives in groups. And they were open-minded about finding a solution by understanding different perspectives that are presented and discussed during the meeting. So I think, like many problems that we face, sustainability, inclusivity, climate change, energy problems, I think we need to be able to open up our perspectives and engage in a dialogue to go through more collaborative problem solving. All my life, I worked in a very large universities. And when I moved to AIM, it's a very, very tiny school. In fact, the number of faculty that we have in an entire institution in terms of full-time faculty is smaller than my previous department division. But, instead of thinking about what limitations you have, you can look for partners in many of the things you do. You can think about small is beautiful and how agile you can be in terms of enlisting support from your colleagues, going door to door. You ask every panelist here, how do you make your faculty do the work? I don't have to talk to 250 faculty. I have 30-some faculty members of full time. So I think, there are things that we can do alone, whether you're a big school, top school, the school with the resources that always have been there, or you're a small school in a developing country where you can explore collaboration opportunities. But I think diversity is very, very a fundamentally important issue, because when you have all the brilliant people, but coming from all the same perspectives, same experiences, same background, it does put some limitations in terms of how you go about solving the problem or finding solutions.
No, thank you so much. And I think, you correctly emphasize the need to have different perspectives, have an open mindset.
Yeah.
One follow-on question for you is, how important do you think it is to get perspectives from outside, especially for a small school, let's say that like one in which you are in right now? And I mean, I'm just looking at how do you integrate the inside and the outside? Any thoughts on that?
As I briefly mentioned, we cannot do everything by ourselves. It's impossible. But that doesn't necessarily mean we limit what we do by the fact that we have a limited resources, either whether it's manpower, financial resources, or just the fact that we are located in the Philippines. So that's where you go about finding right-minded collaborators. So different things, different purposes, at different times. I'm always looking for partners. And one of the reasons I go and meet people is to look for partners. I don't think when you say partners, collaborators, everybody has to contribute an equal extent. I think you need to think about, however, what is the role of different players in any kind of collaboration. And I think as long as you can hit the right note, as long as it's sustainable, I think you can think about doing more partnership, more alliances, collaboration, rather than having to do everything by yourself.
Great. I know I want to leave some time for questions from the audience out here. I'm looking at questions online, and there's one question which is probably a segue also into our second part of the discussion. This, I think, is from a student. The question reads as follows: we are learning and working on projects based on SDG in our MBA school. What are some ways in which you can create a bigger impact? So students asking the question, we're doing something, how can we actually see more impact? The question is also being raised in terms of how can we scale up our efforts? So things are happening in schools, but how can we scale up? So I was just wondering, in relation to this question, the issue of scalability, the issue of maybe your own future, what do you see as would be a wish list? You have been a dean for a year and a half, and so in a sense, some sense, what would you see as your wish list for the future? One example from there.
Yeah, so this is something that is really, it touches on a larger question, which is the role of universities, including business schools in the society. I mean, we are in the knowledge business. We generate knowledge, we train the future leaders, but fundamentally, we are in the business of innovation. And so the question is, how do we get or steer our innovation process to address the societal impacts, to think about, to really come up with something that will be really helpful to society. And so this touches on education, this touches on scaling up our education programs, it touches on engagement, the engagement of the local community, and it touches upon the research efforts of our faculty members. So let me first share with you my thoughts about the research part, because this is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, which is the definition of scholarship. When we have initiatives to encourage our faculty members, especially for a university like Cornell, to conduct research with the goal of having positive impacts on society, fundamentally, it comes down to what is scholarship. Is scholarship defined by the top journal publications? So in economics, there's top 5 for those economists. For those who are in the audience who are economists, there's tyranny of top 5 journals. And in finance, there's top 3, et cetera, right? And for a big part of our history, scholarship is defined by those top journal publications. But increasingly, we realize that there's another kind of scholarship that might not be published in the top journals, but is really having big impacts on society. And they are being cited by policymakers, not necessarily in other journals. In Google Scholar, you might not be able to find it, but they are actually very impactful when it comes to policymakers. So is that a scholarship that we should emphasize? Is that the kind of scholarship that should be brought into classrooms to our students, undergraduates or MBA students? And so this is a fundamental issue that I think higher education needs to address, which is the scholarships piece. So I can give you examples later on, but let me stop over there.
No, I think that's very timely also, this issue you're raising for universities and business schools, because that's a question all of us have to face. So thank you for raising it. Maurice, coming from a business perspective, once again, I mean, what would you like to see do or happen inside Wits in the future?
I would like to see partnership. Partnerships is the way to go. And a business, you know, you've got to partner with everyone. Partner with your suppliers, with your customers, partner with your supply chain. And I see in business, in the academia, you've already made this point. So I call myself pracademic. I'm not an academic. I'm a pracademic. I see this obsession, and my sister mentioned it, about just producing an article and put it in a journal, and I have to get the approval. And I always ask myself, what value does it add to the society? So I think the partnership with, and this is something that I've also been pushing at Wits Business School. We've got very brilliant professors producing very good innovation and technology, but the ability to commercialize it and actually scale it and develop a business that will actually come out is a big issue. We're developing that capacity. I'm at the front of, in the leading and developing that capacity to really do that. As here, I want to say that partnership with scientists to build businesses and research and come up with solutions. Partnership with large emitters. We are partnershiping with very big organizations that emit, and look at how partnership with energy regulators, because we need to create a regulatory framework that is conducive for growth and development and create an environment. Partnership with government through its agency. We have a partnership, for instance, with Petroleum Agency of South Africa, in order to be able to, how do we move the licensing regime in order to ensure that we promote investments. Partnership with the education authorities to create a chair for hydrogen economy. I mean, we're all talking about it, but how do we actually make sure that it happens? We're partnership with my friend here, Nick, and Paul was here, but Bauer from the University of Houston. And in order to make sure that Houston is a capital city of energy in the US, and us, how do we actually gain that value? Even a partnership with small University of Guyana that is looking at the oil and gas. They've just discovered so much resources there. How do we partner? The real game here, collaboration, partnership, and then making sure that we form consortiums to tackle these problems that we're facing.
No, I think the partnership is something that businesses have perfected, or at least emphasized a lot, because that's the only way you can deal with this uncertain environment and rapid technology.
You can de-risk a lot of things.
Exactly. So, and I think must say, of my own experience of having been in academia for many decades now, we are not as good at partnership as we think we are. So we often think that we just collaborate with a few professors for research here and there, but business schools, universities are very poor at partnering in general. Jikyeong, come to you, but as I come to Jikyeong, I want to also request you to just prepare your questions. As soon as she finishes, I'll come to the audience. Yeah, please, Jikyeong.
Right, so I think today's younger generations, compared to my generation, I think they are much more aware. They are very keen to actually make a difference in society, and I do believe they are very, very sincere. But I always say, don't think you can just get out of undergraduate program or even master's program and start making a difference. I think they need to understand that it takes time, patience, among other things, right? So I think I would like to say to that student that, getting the basics right, getting the basic framework or the knowledge or tool sets and awareness of what's happening is really important. But the second thing I would emphasize, understanding the context is really important. You know, some of you know I am Korean. I lived in America almost 17 years. I lived in the UK 15 years. Out of that, I lived in Madrid for 2 years in Spain, and I've been at AIM for 8 years. And although I'm Korean, I'm back in Asia. I realize the way we go about solving problems at large universities with lots of resources, or developed countries like the US, UK, even Spain, it's very, very different from how we should go about solving problems and creating that impact in developing countries, whether it's Africa, Southeast Asia. And I think that's one of the things our students need to realize, that you can make a difference, but you cannot make a difference, especially a lot of my younger step talk about work-life balance. They want to make a difference. They want to change the world, want to have a work-life balance. It doesn't always work as neatly as they hope, but getting the basics right and understanding the context. Say in the US, you know, large university working with the businesses could perhaps make a huge difference. But in my part of the world, I can tell you, unless you know how to work with the government agencies, as well as the communities, it's really, really difficult to move a needle. And that's where I think the importance of understanding the context becomes very, very important. So they can pick up some of the knowledge and tool sets from the textbook, but unless they experience and experiment, why having, I always talk about the four collaborators: academics, businesses, government, and the community societies. They need to experience that, whether it's the project or internship or working on a research project. I think when students, younger students, experience the power of a real collaboration in a different context, I think that's perhaps one step closer to for them being a leader, where they actually understand how they go about making a bigger social impact.
Thank you so much, Jikyeong. That's very, very insightful. I think very useful also for all our students to keep in mind, and for us faculty also to keep in mind as we look at the world and the research that we are undertaking. We have about 10 minutes, maybe 7 minutes for questions. Happy to take questions. Just raise your hand. We'll take maybe a couple of questions, and then we will request the panel members to react to it. Who would like to pose a question? We'll take maybe 2 or 3 questions together and then request panel. Please carry on.
My question is, we've heard in several of the presentations the issue that sometimes the academic research takes too long to produce some impact, and sometimes the academic research make no impact at all in the society. And we talk about the another scholarship, as Jinhua mentioned. And my question is, for academic research, we rely on the peer review system for assuring quality of the production. And how can we assure the quality of alternative scholarships, more the kind of intellectual production that does not go through the peer review process, and without taking the risk of producing work that may have an impact, but not really a positive impact. And we've seen a lot of this during the COVID, a lot of results being shared without the proper review, and arguing that for the efficacy of some drugs that showed not effective at all. So my question is, how can we assure the quality of this?
Let's get another question or two. I saw one more hand. Yes, please, here in front.
So my question is, what's the driver for business schools like deans to be drivers of innovation?
Okay. Very simple and clear. Any third question? Any other question that anyone's posed? Okay, so two questions. Who wants to make Jinhua? You want to?
Yeah, so let me, maybe talk to I mean, those two questions are related, but let me just try to address the first question. I think when it comes to scholarship, to innovation, to publication processes, peer review is critical. You cannot get rid of critical peer review. So when I talk about, what is scholarship and also the role of top publications, I think that is critical. There's no problem for professors, for researchers to aim for the top journals. That's fantastic because that is the way to go beyond the traditional thinking. The problem is that has become the monopoly in higher ed. And so to a point where the other kind of scholarship, where it is still peer-reviewed research, but it's just not published in the top journals, but it has broader social impacts, more applied research. So that monopoly by the top tier research or publication in the top journals, that monopoly has come to a point where the second kind of research was not appreciated or was not considered as scholarship. And that is the problem. And so the more applied research is not really a substitute for the top tier research. It is a complement. And so, but peer review is critical. We have to have the credibility because otherwise it's self-destroying. If we are thinking about just publications or papers without peer review, but says that, oh, it has affected this or that. And I think for higher education, that is dangerous. It's just that we need to have open mind in terms of the kind of journals, in terms of the broader impacts of our publications with high standards.
Maurice,
Well,
what's driving your question? Yeah.
yeah, what is driving in innovation for business school? I think it's survival. If you're not driving innovation as business school, and I'm sure most of you have been here, you will be Kodak. Kodak leadership was arrogant when lots of Japan Mitsubishi's cameras were coming in. They said, we are Kodak. I've got a friend here from Finland that I met. And I asked him a question, what happened to Nokia? He said, the story of Kodak happened to Nokia. In fact, the technology that the iPad, the iPhone has was already inside Kodak. But where's Kodak now? It's an adjustment of history. Coming from business, I've been looking at business school and saying, what is happening at business schools? It's becoming irrelevant. And unless we really, it's a burning platform. We have to come and occupy our rightful place. I was at a business school 25 years ago. Business school leaders, we're assuming leadership role, even in the public discourse. And we're bold. Where we?
That's a very powerful driver indeed. Jikyeong.
I think my point is very, very similar. I was going to actually answer to Nick's question from my own perspective. And it comes down to the fact that, I earlier said you need to walk the talk. And that is, you cannot be stopping however good you are. Because, we talked about Nokia, we can talk about many different examples. I think the same thing can happen to business schools. If you don't continuously innovate, whether it's curriculum, program, or even teaching the same thing in different ways, during the pandemic, so many innovations coming out. And I think it's the same thing we have to think about. How do we innovate? What do we innovate? What is the role of innovation? Again, will be different from school to school. So I don't think innovation means the same thing for all business schools in terms of what drives one school's dean to innovate, might be slightly different from another school dean's perspective, because our needs are different and there are different ways going about innovating and what you focus innovations on. But I think if you don't change what you're doing, however good you are, you will sooner or later fall behind. I think that's the only one principle that I think that actually matters.
Well, I think, we have to thank our three deans for really, I think, some very insightful and I think from the heart, comments from the heart. You feel it and I think you live it. I know that their comments resonated with me, and I'm sure it resonated with many others in the audience. What I hope, is that you are listening to whatever you heard today, whatever our colleagues on this Dean panel shared, and are really using that as inspiration for action, because what we really need right now is action. And I think if I had to, I was thinking myself, for my own sake, what is that one theme that I would take from the day? And at least for speaking for myself, the theme I think I take from today is this word of courage. We know what's going wrong. We know in some sense the scenarios that might happen if we don't act. Yet we have many constraints of various kinds inside our own systems. And the question is, do we have the courage to push and forge a new path forward? And that courage is not easy because, there are many internal barriers for ourselves as leaders, like we are human beings like anyone else. At the same time, the institutional barriers too, because not all institutions are ready for that kind of change. So I wish us all courage and good luck and a grand gala evening dinner. Please join me in thanking our panel members.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to give some logistics. So this evening, our gala dinner and our cocktail reception starts at 6:30. The first hour is the cocktail hour sponsored by MIT Sloan. And then the dinner will follow right afterwards, sponsored by Leeds University Business School and Cabell's Scholarly Analytics. It's at the West Indies House. We're not providing bus transportation so that we can reduce our carbon footprint, but you can use your passes that were given in your badges, which has access to the trams and the trains in the city. So we will see you tonight. Thank you.